Hey, it's Bram Duffee with a public speaking class. Today we're talking about speech outlines and creating speech outlines. You know, I always think about speech outlines in the traditional sense of someone having note cards that fall on the floor everywhere. And there are all kinds of different ways that people document to prepare for a presentation, and today's the day to get at it. I want you to start off imagining that you're about to head into a journey to a place that you just haven't been before, and you're going to need two different kinds of maps. You'll need a detailed map to plan your route, and then a more simplified map to guide you while you're on the road. It's those kinds of same principles that apply when preparing a presentation. You're going to need two different kinds of outlines, a working outline and then a speaking outline. So the working outline is your detailed map. It's going to be a comprehensive guide that helps you organize your main points and develop supporting points that uses the research and data that you've gathered. It's like plotting your route, deciding where to start, and which landmarks to visit and where to go. So when you finish, you'll have a working outline that's going to represent your entire speech in full sentence. So it's a full sentence outline of your presentation. And so that is the working outline. But when you're actually on the road, or in this case, standing in front of your audience, a detailed map can be overwhelming, right? So that's when the speaking outline comes in. This is your simplified map. It's designed for quick reference, and it's containing ideas in condensed form. It's represented just by keywords or just by short phrases. And it serves as a memory tool guide that gets you through the presentation without getting too much lost in information. So in essence, the working outline is your backstage assistant. It's going to help you prepare and rehearse, while that speaking outline is just your co-pilot that guides you during your actual presentation. So both of these are essential tools in doing the delivery of a successful impact speech. It seems like, gosh, there's just so much work involved in this. But the truth is that if you follow the process of doing it this way, then it will end up being less work in the long run, because what you want to have something that you can read, reflect on, practice from, and then get to a point where we can get to this extemporaneous style speaking. And remember, extemporaneous style speaking just means that you are speaking to an audience in a way so that you're able to look down at an idea and communicate it, right? So it's something that you've practiced. It's not something that you're reading a script about. So these two speech outlines are important for your presentation because one helps you firm up the main points and the other one helps you substantiate them. So when you have the speech in the full sentence form, you might notice that we do very much write differently than we speak. So you might notice that your speech pattern is not going to be the same as the words on the paper. But still yet, those transitions that we've talked about are important to involve, even though they sound like the written parts of it. Because if you say things like hence or therefore, those are commonly things that we use when we write. But when we speak, it's not as common. That's fine, especially if we have that as a purpose. So the next part of our talk together, I want to go through and talk all through a speech outline. And I have a speech outline example for you that I have uploaded to the lecture notes, so you can look at it there. Or I want to be able to give you just some brief view of what this looks like. So can you see how we're backwards on this? But this is an outline format that shows someone that has taken a purpose statement and a thesis statement and then developed the introduction and the body and then the conclusion. And so today, this is the outline that I want to talk from. So I'll give you a couple seconds while I grab my notes to move around while you can do that. So look for that outline. Now, what happens is that we create an outline so that it's usually typed so that we can see it easily. And we do this in Roman numerals. So Roman numeral 1, and then number 2, number 3, subpoint major A and B, and then subpoint numbers 1, 2, 3. These things help us create structure. Many of you may have done outlines for other classes or other purposes in life. Normally when you create an outline, it's standard that they say that if you do a point number 1, you have to have a number 2. So everything has to be in odd numbers, right? If there's a 3, then there has to be a 4. And so when we write speeches, that's not the case. You can have an outline that doesn't have two sub-example points under each one the same way. We're looking for overall what this is gonna do for the cohesiveness as well, not just that you have it down there. So let's take the opportunity to think through a whole speech. And let's start out with the introduction and work through how this can develop. So we create our introduction almost last because we design the purpose statement and the thesis statement first. Then we develop the body with all the main points and figure out how we're going to support those points. And then after all that is done, then we have an opportunity to figure out how we're going to frame this thing, how we're going to structure this thing. And so the way it works is that your introduction and your conclusion are really mirrored pieces of each other. And so if you're looking at the speech outline form that I have for you, you can take a look at where it says introduction has an attention getter, and then there's a justification, and then there's an initial signposting or summary. So points 1, 2, and 3. I'm talking about right there. Okay, attention getter, justification, initial signposting. What's cool is that your conclusion is the same thing. It's just backwards. Okay, so here's how this works. You deliver a presentation by starting it out by giving an attention getter. We'll talk about some different kinds of attention getters in a little bit, but your attention getter needs to be able to grab your audience's attention, make them pay attention to you and the topic. Now, after you have their attention, you need to use that moment to seize on their attention and tell them why it matters to them. So first you get their attention, and then you say, this is why it matters to you. This is what's in it for you. This is how it connects to your life. This is why you should care. Okay? All those kinds of questions need to be answered as soon as you get their attention. So that's the justification part of the introduction. So now that you got their attention, then you justify it. After you've justified it, then you're going to back it up with something. And normally in the very last part of your introduction, you will be able to share what your thesis statement is. Actually, the last part of the introduction usually is the thesis statement. And that thesis statement can be designed to signpost what happens next. You know what a signpost is? A signpost is like when you're driving along and you see a sign and it tells you what's coming up. You know that there's a particular street coming up, or you know that there's a particular town coming up. That signpost lets you know what's coming ahead. So that same kind of preview happens at the very end of your introduction. So you've gotten their attention. Once you've gotten their attention, you justify why they should listen. And then you've told them what you're going to tell them next in the presentation. So you might say, in that last part, you might say, so today we're going to get to talk about this topic in a way so that it addresses blue, green, and red. So what that just did was it said, it tied those things together. And then to compare that, let's look at the mirror image of what the conclusion looks like. The conclusion, if you look at it, says, it's right here. Conclusion is a justification, is a summary statement, and then the justification, and then a package statement. So the summary statement is the exact same thing that you had just talked about, right? So I might start out my conclusion by saying, Today we've had an opportunity to talk about blue, red, and green. That's what your conclusion gives. It just shares the sparse pieces of what you've given them. And then now is your opportunity to remind them of why it matters to them. So today we talked about the colors red, green, and blue. And so now you're able to see how you can incorporate those colors into the color scheme for your office of choice. So what it did was it personalized it next. And then my most favorite part of the conclusion is the very, very last thing that you do. The very last thing that you do allows for the audience to get a feel of what just happened to them. And so what I like to do is deliver a package statement. And that package statement can be very impactful if it refers back to the attention getter. So if I initially told a story about my llama and the experience that I had using my llama's fur to make socks, let's say, at the very end of the presentation, it would be super nice if I could make a statement that referred back to that example I gave at the introduction, right? So I might say, so next time you're wearing socks, you'll think of my llama and how those processes went for me. Just something that simple. And it's done really often when we see people who do comedy routines. Those comedy routines will have a killer joke early on, and it will kind of set the theme and set the pace. And then near the end, or maybe the very last thing that the audience gets out of that comedian is a reflection of that same joke. And it just hits home because it's like tying a package up with a bow. It's like laying it out there for a presentation. And so letting the audience know that it's the end can be really important. So all of this stuff adds to what comes together in your speech outline. But we have to build it from the very beginning. So please, the purpose statement and thesis statement must be written first. Then you can start digging through to pull together as much stuff as you can for the body, and use the body to pull different ideas together so that we have things that have equal weight and unity. And then after those things can come together, you can ratify your statement of purpose and your thesis statement so that it helps you be able to incorporate sort of a summary. So then that summary comes together in a way that is reflected in the beginning and at the end of the presentation. We're going to talk more in other videos about just the introduction and just the conclusion, but this is what we have today for the speech outline.